Picture this. You have just stepped into an elevator in a high-rise building.
Oh boy, I know where this is going.
Yeah, right? The heavy steel doors slide shut, and they just seal you inside this suspended metal box. The hum of the cables kicks in.
Yep.
And you are not alone. Standing exactly like 24 inches away from you is a complete, total stranger.
Just way too close for comfort.
Way too close. So you look at the floor indicator, watching the numbers light up, and they look at the ceiling.
Or you both just stare intensely at your phones.
Exactly. Even though neither of you has a signal in there. And the silence in that tiny, 80 square foot space, it isn't just quiet, it is dense.
It feels incredibly heavy.
So heavy, your heart rate might even tick up a fraction of a beat. And then almost involuntarily, just to break the crushing weight of that silence, your mouth opens.
You can't help it.
You literally can't. You hear yourself say, crazy weather we've been having lately, huh?
Classic. The absolute classic.
It is. Now, let's be honest with ourselves here. You don't actually care about the weather.
Not at all.
And they certainly don't care about the weather. Yet the stranger immediately nods, their shoulders drop a little bit, and they reply, oh, I know, I heard it's supposed to rain all weekend.
Right.
You exchange like 3 more utterly meaningless sentences, the doors slide open, and you both just flee in opposite directions, never to speak again.
It is a universally recognized performance. We all do it.
It is. And the question is why? Like, why on earth do we do this? Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are someone who craves real, substantial conversations, if you want the aha moments without being overwhelmed by the noise of everyday life, you probably detest interactions exactly like the one I just described.
Absolutely. They can feel agonizing.
But today, our mission is to rescue something universally dreaded from its terrible reputation. We are talking about small talk.
Yes, we are.
We've gathered this truly fascinating sociolinguistic research. It's a transcript from an advanced English language learning show that entirely deconstructs the hidden, highly complex matrix of human conversation.
It's a brilliant source, really.
It really is. We are going to journey from that polite, agonizing chatter about the rain all the way down to the actual mechanics of true, profound vulnerability.
Because small talk is, it's often seen as the absolute bane of our existence.
Especially for introverts.
Definitely. It's viewed as this superficial, soul-sucking waste of breath. But today, we are playing devil's advocate.
We are. We are going to prove to you that not only do you actually need it, but you might be entirely misunderstanding its purpose. Okay, let's unpack this. Why does small talk feel like such a miserable hostage situation? And yet, why is it biologically essential?
It really is the ultimate paradox of modern human interaction. I mean, to understand why it's essential, we first have to validate why it feels so awful to so many of us.
Right. We have to acknowledge the pain.
Exactly. That elevator scenario captures the visceral aversion perfectly. Small talk often feels like the dreaded elevator pitch of social interaction.
Yes. The pressure.
We feel this intense, suffocating pressure to perform. It just feels vacuous. I mean, have you ever been to a mandatory networking event?
Oh, don't even get me started.
You're standing there, you've got this tiny paper plate with a lukewarm meatball on it, and you're desperately scanning the room.
Looking for an exit.
Always looking for the exit. You approach a stranger, and it feels like you are just reciting lines in a poorly written play where neither actor actually cares about the plot.
Yeah, you're talking about the traffic on the I-95 or, the quality of the hors d'oeuvres, and internally you are screaming.
We view it as a performative, artificial barrier, keeping us from having real, authentic, meaningful human connection.
Right, but here is where my brain gets stuck and where I kind of have to push back on the idea that it's just a pointless barrier.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we all collectively, across almost every culture, universally hate talking about the commute or the appetizers or the humidity, why do we keep doing it?
It's a fair question.
Humanity has evolved past so many useless behaviors, right? If we all secretly want to bypass these trivialities and get to the good stuff, why do we fail to do so every single time? Like, if it's so terrible, why haven't we just collectively agreed to skip the boring stuff?
Because it isn't boring to your subconscious. We don't skip it because we literally can't afford to.
Wait, can't afford to?
No, we can't. Small talk is not actually a transfer of useless information. The source text makes this great argument that it serves a very specific load-bearing structural purpose in human society.
Okay.
It acts as a vital social lubricant.
A social lubricant.
Precisely. Think about the basic laws of physics. Think about what a lubricant does inside the engine of your car.
Right. It stops raw metal from grinding against raw metal.
Exactly. Without it, the friction generates heat, the heat generates sparks, and within minutes, you have total catastrophic system failure.
An engine block literally fusing together.
Yes. And human interaction works on the exact same principle. When two strangers meet, there is an immense amount of inherent psychological and evolutionary friction.
Because we don't know each other.
Exactly. Think about it from a survival standpoint. You do not know the person standing next to you in the elevator. You do not know their intentions. You don't know their mental stability. And you cannot predict their next move.
That is actually terrifying when you strip it down.
It is. So if you remove the social lubricant of small talk, that psychological friction becomes incredibly abrasive. It triggers our threat response.
Okay, let's play with that thought experiment because it's hilarious to actually visualize what happens when that engine lubricant is completely drained.
Go for it.
Imagine you were walking up to a complete stranger waiting at a bus stop. Instead of the standard nod or, the complaint about the bus being late, you just march right up, skip the hello, violate their personal space, and hit them with, what is your deepest, darkest regret in life?
Oh my gosh. The friction there is catastrophic.
It is. Or imagine leaning into their ear and whispering, do you believe in free will, or is determinism the only logical conclusion?
Yeah, if you actually did that, the other person wouldn't engage in a philosophical debate with you.
No. They would grab their bag and physically run away from you, or they would call the police.
It feels so incredibly jarring. It's highly intrusive.
Yeah, when you picture it, you realize that skipping the weather talk isn't just rude. It feels like a massive, aggressive violation of a deeply ingrained social contract.
It is a profound violation, and that reaction, the urge to run away or call for help, is exactly the point.
Wow.
The unspoken social contract of humanity dictates that you must prove you are safe before you are allowed to demand intimacy.
Proving you're safe. Wow.
When you ask a stranger at a bus stop about their deepest regrets out of nowhere, you are demanding a level of psychological exposure, a level of vulnerability that you have simply not earned.
You haven't paid the entry fee.
Exactly. You haven't done the prerequisite work to reduce the friction. And if skipping small talk violates this contract so aggressively, we have to look deeper.
We do.
We have to look at the evolutionary and anthropological roots of why that contract was written into our DNA in the first place. This isn't just about modern etiquette or being polite at a cocktail party. This goes all the way back to our survival wiring.
Which brings us to a fascinating shift in perspective. Because to really understand the networking event, we have to look at primate behavior.
What's fascinating here is the direct anthropological mirror between human small talk and primate grooming.
Yes, the grooming.
If you observe chimpanzees or macaques or baboons in the wild, you will see them spending hours sitting together, meticulously picking through each other's fur.
Just picking away.
Now, on the surface, it looks like a hygiene practice, right? They are removing the occasional tick or a piece of dirt or a dead leaf.
Sure, keeping clean.
But primatologists will tell you that the primary evolutionary purpose of that activity is absolutely not hygiene. A chimpanzee does not need to be groomed for 3 hours a day to stay clean.
Right, that's way too much time for just a few bugs.
The grooming is social bonding. It is a physical manifestation of peace. The rhythmic, repetitive physical contact triggers the release of endorphins and oxytocin, the bonding hormone.
It literally changes their brain chemistry.
It lowers cortisol. It physically regulates the nervous system of the entire troop.
So wait, when I'm standing at the coffee machine in the office and I'm complaining to a coworker about how the printer is jammed again, I am essentially picking imaginary bugs out of their fur.
You are. That is exactly what you're doing.
That is amazing.
When humans engage in small talk, we are executing the exact same biological protocol. We've just substituted physical touch with verbal communication.
Because we can't just go around picking bugs off our coworkers.
Not without a visit to HR, no. So when you say crazy weather we're having, you are not actually exchanging literal meteorological data about the barometric pressure.
Right.
The literal meaning of the words is entirely secondary. It's almost irrelevant. The words are just the fingers combing through the fur.
I love looking at it this way. It's like an airplane pinging a control tower.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah. Think about it. When a commercial jet is thousands of miles away, flying over the ocean, its transponder sends a tiny, repetitive electronic ping to the nearest radar station.
Just a simple ping.
Just a ping. That ping is not sending the passenger manifest. It's not transmitting the dietary restrictions of the people in row 12 or, the audio of the movie playing in the cabin.
Right, it doesn't need to.
It carries almost no complex data.
Yeah.
It is simply establishing a baseline signal. It's saying, I am here, my systems are functioning, a safe connection exists.
Yes.
That is exactly what we are doing. When I walk into the office on Monday morning and ask you, how was your weekend? I am absolutely not soliciting a detailed hour-by-hour itinerary of your Saturday.
Please don't give me the itinerary.
Exactly. I want to know what time you woke up or how you folded your laundry.
Right.
I am offering a verbal handshake. I am pinging your control tower.
That is a brilliant analogy. You are sending a transponder ping, and sociolinguistics tells us that this ping, this verbal handshake, is broadcasting 3 very specific, non-negotiable signals to the other person.
Okay, what are the 3 signals?
Whether you are in an elevator, at a bus stop, or at a networking event, your small talk is communicating. I am friendly, I am sane, and I am open to interaction.
I am friendly, I am sane, and I am open to interaction. That is powerful.
Think about how crucial those 3 specific signals are when you encounter a non-kin human. Number 1, I am friendly. I am not a physical threat to you. I am not going to attack you.
Which historically was a very real concern.
Absolutely. Number 2, I am sane. This is a big one. By following the predictable rules of the weather conversation, I am proving to you that I share your basic understanding of reality.
Oh, wow.
I am predictable. And number 3, I am open to interaction. I acknowledge your presence as a fellow human being, and I am willing to coexist in this space.
So the words themselves, the traffic, the weather, the sports scores, are just the empty vehicles delivering that 3-part survival message.
Exactly. Linguists actually have a formal technical term for this. It is called a phatic expression.
Phatic.
A phatic expression is any communication that serves an entirely social function rather than an informative one.
Okay, let's unpack that term. Phatic. P-H-A-T-I-C. How does a phatic expression actually differ in the brain from a normal sentence?
It differs entirely in intent and processing. If I say to you, the spreadsheet is due at 5:00 p.m., your brain processes that semantically.
It extracts the data.
Right. It analyzes the deadline and alters your future behavior based on that new information. But when I say, nice day, isn't it? Your brain does not check the sky to verify my claim.
You're not looking out the window to double check.
No. It doesn't process the meteorological data. It processes the social gesture. You are not presenting a thesis for debate. You are performing a ritual. You are using language to maintain social cohesion and establish that baseline of rapport.
But here is the catch. And this is where the friction really starts to burn people, I think. While the concept of this verbal handshake, this primate grooming, this phatic pinging is universal across all of humanity, the actual execution of it is deceptively difficult.
Deceptively difficult is a great way to put it.
It's difficult because you can't just make it up. It requires immense cultural fluency. We are forced to follow very specific, highly localized scripts, depending on exactly where we are in the world.
Yes, the scripts vary wildly.
And if you don't know the local script, or if you accidentally deviate from it, things go off the rails incredibly fast.
They absolutely do, because a script, by definition, is rigid. It isn't improvised jazz. It is a set of predefined, choreographed steps that you are expected to know and follow without thinking.
And if you miss a step,
If you miss a step, the other person's threat response instantly activates.
here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at this specific cultural script for English speakers, particularly in American and British cultures. It revolves around what is arguably the ultimate illusion in the English language.
The grand illusion.
The question, how are you? Now, if you are an alien coming to Earth or just someone learning English as a second language, you look at that sentence and you see a question mark. You assume it is an inquiry.
Naturally.
But in the United States, how are you is almost never a genuine inquiry into your actual well-being. It is a phatic expression dressed up in the clothing of a question.
It is a greeting disguised as an interrogation. And we see a hilarious but deeply uncomfortable social faux pas occur whenever someone misreads the room on this script.
Oh, the misread room is so painful.
Imagine you are walking into your office building. A colleague you barely know is holding the door for you. As you walk through, they smile and say, "Hey, how are you?"
It's very standard.
Now imagine you stop walking, you look them in the eye, and you answer with a literal, truthful, intensely accurate 5-minute monologue. You say, "Honestly, Jim, my chronic lower back pain is flaring up terribly today. My credit card debt is mounting, my marriage is feeling a bit strained, and I am battling a lingering sense of existential dread about the trajectory of my career."
You would literally clear the lobby.
People would scatter?
Jim's eyes would widen in absolute terror. He would slowly back away, and he would actively avoid you for the next 5 years.
Precisely. But why? Why is Jim terrified? You answered his question.
You gave him exactly what he asked for.
Right. But he is terrified because you deviated from the script. You created immense cognitive and social awkwardness because you treated a phatic social ritual as an information-gathering exercise.
You broke the dance.
You broke the dance. The expected response in that specific cultural script is reciprocal and meaningless. It is, I'm doing well, thanks, and you, or can't complain, you.
Yeah.
And here is the crucial binding rule of this script. You are expected to say that regardless of your actual emotional state.
Even if your life is falling apart.
You could be having the absolute worst day of your life. Your dog died, your car broke down, but the script demands that in passing to an acquaintance, you say you are fine and return the volley.
Okay, stop right there. I have to push back on this. Because this is the exact point where introverts and deep thinkers throw their hands up in disgust.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
If I am having a terrible, heartbreaking day, and you ask how I am, and I look you in the eye and say, I'm great, thanks, doesn't this mean that our entire foundational system of social interaction is built on a lie?
It feels like a lie, doesn't it?
It really does. Are we not just teaching ourselves and our children to be deeply deceptive from the very first moment we say hello? How can we ever build an authentic society if the entry fee is a sanctioned lie?
That is the most common critique of small talk, and it's a philosophically sound question. But linguistically and sociologically, we need to reframe it. It is not a lie.
How is saying, I'm fine when I'm not fine, not a lie?
Because a lie, fundamentally, requires the intent to deceive someone who is expecting the truth. In this specific cultural ritual, Jim does not expect the truth, and you do not intend to deceive Jim. You both implicitly understand that the exchange of facts is not the goal.
Ah, okay.
It is not deceit, it is a vetting process. Think of it like a CAPT-CHA test on a website. You know those little grids where you have to click all the images containing a traffic light to prove you aren't a robot?
Yes, the I am not a robot test. I fail those half the time.
We all do, but exactly. When you ask someone, how are you? You are administering a human CAPT-CHA test. You are unconsciously testing them to see if they can follow the basic predictable steps of the social dance.
Wow.
If you can properly execute the how are you, I'm fine, and you script, you have successfully clicked all the traffic lights. You have proven that you understand the cultural rules.
You've proven you're not a robot.
Yeah.
Or a threat.
You have proven that you are socially calibrated, that you are not a threat, and that you have a baseline of emotional regulation. You have to prove that you can handle the light, meaningless stuff before you earn the security clearance to discuss heavier, more truthful topics. The script isn't a lie. It is a shield.
A shield.
Yeah.
A mechanism to protect ourselves while we assess the environment. That makes so much sense. But it also leads us to the other side of the coin.
Right.
Because while that shield is necessary to navigate the grocery store or the networking event, humans don't just want to be safe. We also crave the exact opposite.
You crave connection.
We actively crave the deep dive. We crave those late-night, soul-bearing, hours-long conversations where you actually do discuss your existential dread and your back pain and your deepest hopes and dreams.
The good stuff.
Yeah. If the shield keeps us safe, why do we have this burning desire to take it off? Why do we want substance so badly?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, we are fundamentally biologically wired for deep connection. We are apex social creatures.
Our survival literally depended on it.
Historically, our survival depended not just on not killing each other at the bus stop, but on forming deep, unbreakable bonds that could withstand famine, war, and winter.
Right.
But deep bonds require vulnerability, and vulnerability is inherently dangerous. It literally means exposing your soft underbelly to another person. It means giving them information that could be used against you.
Which goes against all our threat detection software.
Exactly. This is why the metaphor of small talk as a shield is so perfect. Small talk protects us while our subconscious furiously calculates the threat level of the person in front of us. When we finally engage in a deep, meaningful conversation, we are making a highly calculated, conscious choice to put down that shield.
And putting down that shield is where the absolute magic of human experience happens. The research we are looking at asserts that dropping this shield is exactly where you find resonance with another human being.
Resonance, it's a beautiful word for it.
It is such a profound concept. Resonance. It's a term from physics, right? It's when two objects naturally vibrate at the exact same frequency, amplifying each other. But you can't just force resonance to happen on command.
No, you really can't.
You can't just walk up to a stranger and demand they vibrate at your frequency.
No, you cannot. You cannot skip the vetting process. You cannot bypass the CAPI-TCHA. And to explain how we bridge this gap between the shield and the vulnerability, sociologists use a brilliant analogy: the swimming pool.
Yes, the pool analogy. I love this because it makes it so visual. Think about a standard swimming pool. You simply cannot have the deep end without the shallow end.
They are the same pool.
They're the exact same body of water contained in the same structure.
Yeah.
You absolutely need the shallow end of the pool to safely enter the water.
You need the stairs.
You walk down the steps, you let your body acclimate to the freezing temperature, you find your footing, and then at your own pace, you slowly wade your way toward the drop-off. Imagine if public pools were just 10-foot deep concrete boxes with no stairs. If you threw a stranger directly into the deep end of your emotional psyche, like hitting Jim with your existential dread at the door, you're essentially throwing someone who isn't ready into 10 feet of freezing water.
They will panic.
They will thrash around. They will scramble for the edge. They will socially drown. The shallow end, the small talk about the weather, is the gentle incline that allows both of you to survive the transition into the deep end.
It provides the necessary, safe, gradual incline. You need both to have a complete, functional, social experience.
But, and this is a massive world-altering but, for anyone who travels or works internationally, the shape of this pool changes.
Oh, dramatically.
How much shallow water there is, how long you have to wade before you hit the sudden drop-off changes drastically depending on where you are in the world. Which brings us to arguably the most crucial, eye-opening sociolinguistic theory we are exploring today.
Yes. This is where we zoom out from the universal human need for connection and examine the highly specific, culturally dependent blueprints for how we built that pool.
If you are listening to this, and you have ever felt deeply awkward traveling in a foreign country, or even just relocating from the American South to New York City, or working with an international team over Zoom, this is the master key.
It explains so much friction.
This theory explains everything. It is the peach versus coconut cultural dimension. And honestly, grasping this is the ultimate hack for mastering human interaction. Let's break this down meticulously. First, let's examine the peach.
The peach culture. Sociologists use the United States as the classic textbook example of a peach culture.
Okay, visualize a peach.
To understand the psychology, visualize the physical structure of a literal peach. It is very soft on the outside, it's fuzzy, it's sweet, and its flesh yields very easily to slight pressure.
Right.
In a peach culture, people are incredibly friendly on the surface. They are highly effusive and chatty with absolute strangers. If you are in a peach culture, people will smile at you on the street.
They will.
They will ask how your day is going while standing in the checkout line at the grocery store. They enthusiastically and constantly use the social lubricant we discussed earlier. They love the shallow end of the pool.
Let's contextualize why that is. Why did America become a peach? If you look at the history, it's a culture built on frontier expansion, constant immigration, and high geographic mobility.
Lots of moving around.
If you are constantly moving to new towns, setting up new businesses, and encountering strangers on the frontier, you do not have 10 years to slowly vet someone.
You don't have the luxury of time.
You need a mechanism to establish fast, shallow trust so you can trade and survive. Hence the soft, fuzzy exterior. It's a survival mechanism for a highly mobile society. You smile, you chat, you establish baseline safety immediately.
Exactly. The historical context dictates the communication style.
Yeah.
But what happens when you bite a little deeper into that peach?
You break your tooth on the pit.
You hit the hard, corrugated pit in the dead center. And this is the hidden difficulty, the grand illusion of the peach culture.
The illusion.
To an outsider, it looks like peaches are willing to be your best friend instantly. But it is famously, notoriously easy to reach the friendliness stage and agonizingly difficult to penetrate the pit and reach the true intimacy stage.
That is so true.
The deepest, most private vulnerabilities of a person in a peach culture are heavily, fiercely guarded behind that pit. They will gladly share their opinions on the weather, a movie, or even their basic political leanings with a stranger at a bar.
They'll tell you their whole life story on an airplane.
But getting them to share their true emotional fears, or getting invited into their actual inner sanctum of trusted, lifelong friends, that can take years of consistent, proven loyalty if it happens at all. The shield is soft, but the armor underneath is entirely rigid.
Wow. Soft outside, impenetrable pit inside. They give you the illusion of access, but deny the reality of intimacy. Okay, now let's contrast this with the exact opposite side of the sociolinguistic spectrum. The coconut culture.
The coconuts.
The research lists countries like Germany, Russia, and large parts of Eastern Europe and Scandinavia as classic coconuts. Now, visualize a coconut. It is hard, it is hairy, it is tough, and it is entirely unyielding on the outside.
There is zero soft exterior.
In a coconut culture, people rarely, if ever, smile at strangers on the street. They actively avoid idle chatter in checkout lines. If you ask a Russian cashier how their weekend was, they will look at you like you have lost your mind.
They essentially skip the shallow end of the pool entirely.
To a peach outsider, it seems like coconut cultures have absolutely zero social lubricant.
It absolutely appears that way. If we look at the historical context here, we are talking about cultures with dense, stable populations. Historically, these are societies of walled cities, deep-rooted villages, and less geographic mobility.
You stay where you are.
In that environment, you don't need to establish fast, shallow trust with strangers every day. You live next to the same people your entire life. Therefore, trust isn't given out freely with a smile. Trust must be heavily vetted over a long period of time. You rely on deep, long-term relationships.
But the payoff. Let's talk about the inside of the coconut.
The payoff of the coconut is entirely different from the peach. Once you manage to crack that hard, protective outer shell, which requires time, effort, proving your competence, and demonstrating deep loyalty, you find that the inside is incredibly soft, sweet, and nourishing.
There's no pit.
There's no inner pit. Once you are accepted into the inner circle of a coconut, you are all the way in. You have achieved total intimacy. In these cultures, the transition from stranger to friend is steep and difficult, but once you are a friend for life.
Wow.
They will drop everything to help you. They fiercely protect their vulnerability with an outer shell, but they do not hold back an ounce of themselves once you earn their trust.
Let's talk about the friction of miscalibration. Because when you put a peach and a coconut in a room together, the sparks don't just fly, the whole engine catches on fire.
Oh, it's a disaster.
I want to do a role play here to really illustrate how this destroys relationships and international business deals. Let's say I am an American executive, a classic peach. I've flown to Frankfurt, Germany to meet with you, a German executive, a classic coconut, to negotiate a massive merger.
Okay, I'm the coconut.
I walk into your boardroom, I drop my briefcase, flash a massive toothy smile and say, "Hey, what an amazing office. Man, crazy flight over, the turbulence was wild, and my kids were texting me the whole time driving me nuts. Anyway, so great to finally be here. How was your weekend? Do anything fun?"
What is happening inside the German executive's brain right now?
The German executive's internal threat response is going off like a siren.
Siren's blaring.
Internally, the coconut is thinking, why is this person smiling so aggressively at me? We are not friends. Why are they sharing intimate details about their children, driving them crazy? That is inappropriate for a business setting. Too much info.
Why are they asking about my weekend? My weekend is my private life. To the coconut, friendliness and smiles are sacred currency reserved strictly for true friends and family.
Sacred currency.
So when the American peach comes in handing out smiles and personal questions like cheap candy, the coconut interprets this behavior very negatively. They think this person is entirely superficial, they are faking this emotion, they are insincere, emotionally unstable, and therefore they cannot be trusted with this merger.
That is tragic because as the American peach, I am using the only tool I have, small talk and vulnerability, to build trust. And the very tool I am using to build trust is actively destroying it.
Exactly. And the reverse is just as damaging. Let's flip it.
Let's do it.
The German coconut walks into an American boardroom in Chicago. They walk in, face completely stoic, no smile. They sit down, open their laptop, look the American in the eye and say, "Good morning. Please open the financial brief to page 4 so we can begin." How does the American peach view that?
The American is deeply offended because the American script dictates that softness and a little bit of shallow and waiting is the mandatory baseline of politeness.
Right.
The peach views the coconut as cold, arrogant, rude, and standoffish. They think, wow, this guy hates me. He's actively hostile. But in reality, the coconut isn't angry at all. They're just being professional and waiting for a substantial, vetted reason to engage emotionally.
Both sides are acting perfectly politely according to their own biological and cultural programming, and both sides leave the room thinking the other is a monster.
So what does this all mean for us, for the listener navigating this complex world.
It means that true mastery of communication, whether you are learning a foreign language or just trying to survive the corporate ladder, isn't just about memorizing vocabulary or perfecting your grammar.
It's about something deeper.
It is entirely about calibration. It is the development of profound emotional intelligence to read the room. You have to know precisely when you are expected to wait in the shallow end and discuss the weather, and when you are expected to skip the stairs and dive into the deep end.
You have to know the shape of the pool.
You have to constantly evaluate the person in front of you and ask yourself, am I dealing with a peach or am I dealing with a coconut? Linguistic intelligence ensures you get the verbs conjugated right. Emotional intelligence ensures you get the cultural context right.
Calibration. I love that. You have to calibrate your transponder ping to their specific radar station. But here's the final puzzle piece. Let's say you've done it. You have calibrated.
Okay.
You know you are at a networking event surrounded by peaches. You are successfully waiting in the shallow end talking about the appetizers. But you don't want to stay there forever.
No, you want some substance.
You want to have a real conversation. You need a mechanism to actually move from the outer fuzz of the peach, past the pit, and into the fruit. You need a bridge. You can't just talk about the humidity for 45 minutes. How do you actually execute the transition?
You need a highly specific conversational segue. You need a structural pivot in the dialogue to safely and consensually transition from the shallow end to the deep end.
And the sociolinguistic research provides a highly actionable, incredibly effective technique for doing exactly this.
Yes. The art of the pivot, the secret to bridging this gap to safely lowering the shield, is learning how to transition from facts to feelings.
Facts to feelings. Let's break down the neurology of why this works. When we are in the shallow end of small talk, we almost exclusively exchange sterile facts. We exchange data points.
The weather is raining, the traffic is heavy, the food is cold.
Right. But true connection, that resonant frequency we talked about earlier, requires emotion. It requires the sharing of internal states. So the pivot technique involves slightly, almost imperceptibly, altering the syntax of the questions you ask.
Let's deconstruct the specific classic example they gave in the research, because we all use this every single day. The most classic, factual, boring small talk question at any gathering is, what do you do for work?
So boring.
Now, look at what happens when you ask that. What do you get? You get a literal job description. You yield a mere corporate title.
I'm an accountant. I work in digital marketing. I'm a project manager.
It is a conversational dead end. It is a sterile data exchange. You're left staring at each other, nodding, saying, oh, nice.
Nice, the conversation killer.
But look at the pivot. Instead of asking what they do, you pivot to feeling. You ask, what is the most exciting project you are working on right now?
Notice the brilliance in the underlying mechanics of that specific question. You are still touching on their daily life and their profession, so it is not an intrusive, boundary-breaking question.
You aren't asking for their deepest regret at a bus stop.
Exactly. It is safe. It is socially acceptable. But by injecting the word exciting, you are fundamentally, entirely changing the nature of the request. You are no longer asking their brain to retrieve a fact. You are asking their brain to identify an emotion.
You are asking them to scan their current life for something that brings them joy or passion or even frustration.
It invites passion. And I completely see why this works on a human level. When you ask about excitement, it opens the door for a narrative.
A story.
Human beings are storytelling primates. We run on narratives. A job title is not a story. I am an accountant has no narrative arc. But I'm currently trying to untangle the financial mess of this startup that grew too fast. That is a story.
That involves stakes and conflict and problem solving.
A creative endeavor that keeps you up at night is a story. By pivoting from facts to feelings, you're rescuing them from the boring, rigid cultural script.
This raises an important question, though, which we have to address. If asking feeling-based questions is so effective and yields such better conversations, why are we so terrified to ask them in the first place? Why do we invariably default to the boring script?
Because of the fear of friction.
Exactly. We default to, what do you do? Because we are terrified that asking a feeling-based question will be perceived as too deep, too fast. We are afraid of acting like a peach in a coconut room. We don't want to violate the CAPI-CHA test.
You don't want to look like the robot.
But the beauty, the absolute genius of the exciting project question is that it gives the other person total control over the depth of the pool. It is non-threatening.
Oh, I see.
If they want to maintain their shield, they can give a shallow answer. Oh, just rolling out some new software, it's fine. But if they want to dive deep, you have just unlocked the gate for them.
The research text ends with a metaphor that just perfectly encapsulates the psychological power of this pivot. When you transition from facts to feelings, you are handing them the microphone and giving them permission to be interesting.
Handing them the microphone.
I want you, the listener, to really think about that. Let that sink in. Most people walking around on this earth are desperate to talk about something they actually care about. They are bursting with niche interests, bizarre hobbies, complex theories, and passionate opinions.
They want to share it.
But the rigid cultural scripts, the necessary social lubricants we discussed earlier, trap them in a cage of politeness. They feel like they aren't allowed to be interesting or to monologue about their passion until someone explicitly gives them the floor.
That's so true.
By asking a feeling-based question, you are officially bypassing the awkwardness of the cultural script. You are handing them the mic.
You are validating their inner world. When you hand them that microphone, you are communicating a profound secondary message. You are telling them, I have vetted you. You have passed the safety check. The social lubricant has done its job. The friction is gone, and I am now ready for your substance. It is one of the most profound, generous gifts you can give someone in a passing conversation. You are seeing them as a human, not just an obstacle in an elevator.
It really is a gift. What an absolutely incredible multi-layered journey we've taken today. Let's recap just how deep this rabbit hole goes.
Let's do a quick summary.
We started by looking at the visceral dread of the elevator pitch, only to discover that those phatic expressions, that seemingly agonizing idle chatter about the rain, is actually the vital, load-bearing social lubricant keeping the machinery of our society from grinding to a catastrophic halt.
Yes.
We traveled back millions of years to our anthropological roots, realizing that complaining about traffic is just the modern equivalent of primate grooming, a deeply embedded biological ritual designed to signal safety, predictability, and friendliness.
We then explored how those ancient primate rituals manifest today as rigid, unyielding cultural scripts, like the American, "How are you?" We reframed that exchange not as a sanctioned lie, but as a necessary human CAPI-CHA test, a vetting process, and a protective shield that allows us to safely navigate the world.
The shield.
And we mapped the complex geography of human vulnerability using the fruit-based cultural dimensions of the highly mobile, soft outside, hard inside peaches and the dense, hard outside, soft inside coconuts. We saw exactly how the friction of miscalibration between those two types can destroy trust in an instant.
And finally, we learned how to actually navigate the waters. We learned how to move from the shallow end to the deep end by utilizing the conversational pivot, shifting the syntax from facts to feelings, handing over the microphone, and actively inviting true resonance.
It's all about that pivot.
So to you, our listener, as you step back out into the world today, the ultimate takeaway here is a massive paradigm shift. Do not be afraid of the shallow end. Do not roll your eyes at the weather talk.
Stop viewing it as a waste of time.
Exactly. It is a vital, necessary ritual. It is a vetting process that keeps you safe. And if you possess the emotional intelligence to navigate that shallow end properly, it just might be the gateway to the exact profound connection you are looking for.
The sociolinguistic study we analyzed today actually ended by asking its audience a brilliant question. It asked people to actively analyze and comment on their own cultural backgrounds.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think that is a fantastic, necessary exercise in self-awareness for anyone listening. Are you operating on peach hardware or coconut hardware?
Absolutely. Know your own transponder signal. And building on that exercise, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day. Think about your next unavoidable interaction.
Picture it.
The next time you find yourself stuck at a mandatory networking event or trapped in an elevator, agonizing over a seemingly vacuous conversation about the traffic or the weather or the appetizers. Pause for a second. Ask yourself, are you currently dealing with a peach or a coconut?
Good question.
Have you calibrated your script? And more importantly, if you feel stuck on the surface, are you stuck because of their impenetrable cultural shell? Or are you stuck simply because you haven't yet had the courage to pivot the conversation, hand them the microphone, and give them permission to be interesting?
An excellent, deeply challenging question to consider.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time those heavy steel elevator doors slide shut and you find yourself standing 24 inches away from a complete stranger, you know exactly what to do. Goodbye. Until next time.
In the United States, it takes exactly 3 seconds of silence for the human body to register a casual conversation as an active threat.
Just 3 seconds.
3 seconds of quiet. That is literally all it takes for your heart rate to spike. You know, your palms start sweating and your brain just releases this flood of cortisol.
Yeah, your brain is just screaming at you to say something.
All right. Anything to fill the void. But, and this is the crazy part, if you take that exact same 3-second pause and drop it into a conversation in Tokyo,
It's totally different.
completely different. Those physiological alarms just do not go off. In fact, that exact same silence is processed as like the highest form of intellectual respect. So welcome to this deep dive into the hidden architecture of human connection.
I mean, it really completely shatters the illusion that we're all experiencing the same reality when we talk to one another, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
We tend to view conversations as just, an exchange of vocabulary.
Mhm.
But beneath the grammar and the syntax, there is this vastly more complex, entirely invisible physics governing every single interaction.
And that invisible physics is our mission for you today. Because, think about it, you can have absolute flawless language fluency, you can be armed with the best vocabulary.
The sharpest wit, the perfect opening lines.
Exactly. But if you don't understand the underlying mechanics of vulnerability or, the cognitive demands of actual listening and the sheer crushing weight of silence, well, wait, I can't use the word silence like that. The sheer crushing weight of the unsaid.
The unsaid.
If you don't get that, you are basically navigating the world blindfolded.
Yeah.
You might think you're walking on this perfectly manicured lawn, but you are actually wandering through a social minefield.
Which is such an apt way to look at it, really. Because a conversation isn't a static thing. It's a highly volatile, highly delicate ecosystem.
Ecosystem is a good word for it.
Right. And we spend so much of our lives focused on the surface layer.
Yeah.
Like the icebreakers, the small talk, the little networking tips.
The weather, the sports scores.
Exactly. But today, we are bypassing that shallow end completely. We're looking at the critical high-stakes territory of what happens after you move past the small talk.
We're going deep.
We are going to examine the exact, microscopic tipping points where a connection either deepens into something profoundly meaningful or where it just disastrously, irreparably collapses.
Because we have all been in that rubble. I know I have. You are trying your absolute hardest to build a bridge to someone. You really want to connect.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, your attempt to pull them closer actually triggers this explosion that pushes them away permanently.
It happens all the time.
It does. And to figure out how to build a connection that actually survives, we first have to look at the most common way we accidentally blow it up. So we really have to look at the extreme peril of asymmetrical vulnerability.
Asymmetrical vulnerability. It's just a phenomenal term for a dynamic almost every single person has experienced, usually without even having the language to identify what was actually happening to them at the time.
Well, we all know that to get past the superficial small talk, you have to be vulnerable. That is the golden rule of connection.
Right. Everyone says that.
But there is a cliff edge to vulnerability. And when you drive off that cliff, you enter the dangerous territory of trauma dumping.
And we need to be extremely precise about what that entails, because trauma dumping is often miscategorized. People just think it's someone being open or talking about their feelings.
Right, they think they're just sharing.
But it's fundamentally different from healthy sharing. Trauma dumping is the act of unloading immense, heavy psychological burdens onto an unsuspecting listener without their prior consent.
Without their consent.
Exactly. And critically, without having built the structural foundation of intimacy required to hold that weight.
Without their consent. I mean, that phrase is the crux of the entire issue, isn't it? Because if you think about the classic scenarios where this happens, there is almost always this element of entrapment.
Always.
Picture this, right? You are on a long cross-country flight. You are boxed into the window seat. The seatbelt sign illuminates.
You're stuck.
You are physically trapped in a metal tube miles above the earth, and the complete stranger in the middle seat turns to you, makes eye contact, and out of absolutely nowhere begins aggressively detailing the agonizing, bitter intricacies of their recent divorce.
Or dropping a highly complex, devastating medical history right into your lap.
Yes,
It's wild.
The physical claustrophobia of the airplane perfectly mirrors the psychological claustrophobia of the interaction.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Or consider the dynamic of sitting alone at the corner of a bar, right? You're just waiting for a friend. You make brief, polite eye contact with the person on the stool next to you, and suddenly you are submerged in a monologue about their deepest childhood traumas.
You're pinned down. You literally can't leave without being incredibly rude.
You are pinned down. It's suffocating.
But why does it feel so uniquely terrible for the listener? Because on paper you could argue, well, wow, this stranger really trusts me. They're being so open.
Right. You think you should feel honored. Yeah. But in reality, your skin is crawling and you are just desperately looking for an exit.
It feels terrible because it is a severe boundary violation. It's a hijacking of your emotional agency.
Hijacking. Wow.
When someone does this to you in an inescapable environment, they're forcibly transferring an unearned emotional debt onto your shoulders.
An emotional debt.
Think about it like this. Healthy human connection operates on a reciprocal system. It's a gradual mutual exchange of trust. But the oversharer bypasses all of that. They deposit a massive toxic asset into your emotional bank account and essentially say, hey, you manage this for me now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You didn't agree to the emotional labor required to process this stranger's deepest pain.
You are literally drafted into being their therapist against your will.
Exactly.
There is this brilliant analogy from the sources that helps visualize this dynamic perfectly. So true vulnerability is like a reciprocal tennis match.
Right. The tennis analogy.
Yeah. You step onto the court, you stand on your side of the net, and you lightly hit the ball over. The other person receives it, gauges the speed, and gently hits it back.
It's a rhythm. You're playing a shared game.
Exactly, a shared game. Trauma dumping, on the other hand, is like showing up for that casual volley, and the other person drags a massive industrial bucket of tennis balls onto the court and just violently smashes them at your face, one after another, as fast as they can.
And the crucial element of that analogy is that you, the listener, you don't even have a racket.
You don't even have a racket.
You are entirely unequipped to return the volley because you haven't warmed up, you haven't agreed to a high-stakes match, and you don't even know the rules they're playing by.
Yeah.
You're just standing there absorbing the physical impact of their emotional data.
You're just getting pelted. It's brutal. Which brings us to the actual mechanical failure happening inside the brain of the person doing the dumping.
Right. What's going wrong for them?
Yeah. It comes down to a complete lack of what we call calibration. The fundamental flaw here is treating vulnerability like an on-off switch. You are either closed off completely or you flip the switch and the dam just totally breaks.
But vulnerability isn't a switch. It is a highly sensitive, continuously adjustable dial.
A dial.
A dial that requires constant active tuning. You cannot just set it and forget it. You have to actively read the real-time feedback of the person sitting in front of you.
What kind of feedback?
Well, are they leaning in? Are their pupils dilating with interest? Or are their arms crossed? Are they offering substantive replies? Or are they just nodding politely, kind of looking for an escape route?
Right, the polite nod. We all know that nod.
Exactly. You have to escalate the intimacy gradually. You absolutely must hold the heavy emotional artillery in reserve until the bridge between you and that person has been reinforced enough to support the weight.
Oh, I love that.
If you drop a 10-ton safe onto a bridge made of twigs, the bridge doesn't just groan, it disintegrates.
So if we look closely at the psychology of the oversharer, the person dropping the safe on the twigs, what is actually broken inside them? Like, are they just incredibly selfish? Are they doing this maliciously?
It's actually very rarely malicious. In fact, it's usually rooted in a profound loneliness and a tragic misunderstanding of how intimacy actually works.
Wow, loneliness.
Yeah. The oversharer typically suffers from a broken calibration dial. They lack the internal intuitive mechanism required to, read the room or gauge reciprocal comfort.
So they just don't get those subtle cues.
Right. Because they cannot sense the subtle, quiet exchange of true, slow-building intimacy, they attempt to substitute the volume of information for the depth of connection.
Oh, that makes so much sense. They think density equals closeness.
Precisely. They operate under this tragic fallacy that if they just hand you the darkest, most secret data points of their existence right this second, an instant, unbreakable bond will somehow form.
It's like a shortcut that doesn't work.
Exactly. They mistake the sheer offloading of personal data for an emotional relationship. They are trying to bypass the tedious, uncertain, vulnerable work of actually laying a foundation.
Yeah.
And they opt instead to just drop a fully constructed house directly onto an empty lot.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit because there is a massive glaring contradiction in how our modern culture instructs us to behave.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about almost every self-help book, every corporate retreat, every viral TED Talk from the last decade. The reigning directive everywhere is just be authentic.
Right. Authenticity is the buzzword.
We are constantly told to bring our whole selves to the table, to stop hiding behind polite masks, to really lean into vulnerability. So if society is literally demanding that we be open and raw, isn't it incredibly confusing when a person does exactly that and is immediately penalized and labeled a trauma dumper?
That is a very fair point.
Like, how on earth is someone supposed to distinguish between genuine authenticity and a boundary violation in real time?
It's a fantastic pushback because it exposes the severe danger of weaponizing therapy speak and taking broad self-help slogans out of their proper context.
Right.
Be authentic was never meant to mean abandon all situational awareness and social grace. Authenticity is about the truth of your internal state, yes. But successful human interaction requires you to balance your internal truth with the external capacity of the person sitting across from you.
So how do we balance that? What's the metric we should be using?
Think of it through the mechanics of pouring a glass of water.
Okay.
Your authenticity, your raw experiences, your fears, your trauma, that is the water. It is real, it is nourishing, it is undeniably true. But the relationship you have built with that specific person, that is the glass.
The glass.
The glass dictates the capacity of the interaction. If you only have a shot glass-sized relationship with the stranger next to you on the airplane, and you attempt to pour a gallon jug of your intensely authentic water into it, you aren't building a connection. You are just making a massive, deeply uncomfortable mess.
Wow. The relationship dictates the size of the container. That is such a clarifying way to look at it.
You have to calibrate the pour to match the container. The tragedy of the trauma dumper is that they ignore the size of the glass entirely and just keep violently pouring, wondering why the other person is drowning.
Which means true, calibrated vulnerability requires an immense amount of agonizing restraint. You might be holding a gallon of water that you are just desperate to pour out.
You might be aching to share it.
Right. But you have to actively restrict yourself. You have to carefully measure out your words drop by drop to ensure you don't overflow the glass. And honestly, if speaking requires that level of intense active calibration, it completely changes how we have to look at the person sitting across from us.
It absolutely does.
Because receiving that water, like actually listening to it, demands a totally different but equally exhausting psychological muscle.
It demands an entire rewiring of how we perceive our role in a conversation.
Because we are totally conditioned to think of listening as a passive state, aren't we? It's the default setting. You just sit back, keep your mouth shut, and let the acoustic sound waves hit your eardrums while the other person does the hard work of talking.
But if you actually study the mechanics of connection, that passive approach is a complete myth. Genuine connection-building listening is an intense, high-calorie, active discipline.
It burns energy.
It is exhausting because it forces you to fight against your own biological and psychological programming. The brutal reality of human interaction is that the vast majority of people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen merely with the intent to reply.
They are literally just waiting for their turn to speak.
Exactly. And there's a fascinating neurological reason for this. The human brain processes speech at a significantly faster rate than the average person can actually talk.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a speaker might produce, say, 150 words a minute, but your brain can process language at upwards of 400 to 800 words a minute.
Wow, so there is this massive cognitive surplus happening while you are listening.
A massive delta. You have all this excess cognitive capacity just sitting there while the other person is slowly getting their sentence out. And what does the default human ego do with that excess capacity?
What does it do?
It self-reflects. It turns inward. While the other person is pouring out their thoughts, your ego hijacks that extra processing power to internally rehearse your next witty anecdote.
Oh, no.
You start scanning their narrative solely for a keyword or a jumping off point so you can seamlessly bring the focus back to your absolute favorite subject.
Yourself.
I
am feeling deeply personally attacked right now because it is so painfully true. Think about how often we treat conversations like a stage play.
A stage play?
Yeah, but instead of sitting in the audience, giving the actor on stage our full attention and really appreciating their performance, means we are standing in the wings. We are anxiously clutching our props, sweating, desperately waiting for our cue so we can sprint out into the spotlight and do our own little monologue.
We aren't watching their play at all.
No, we are just waiting for the exact moment we can interrupt it with our own.
It's the ego's innate gravitational pull. And to counteract that intense gravity, you have to utilize two specific, highly active conversational tools: mirroring and validation.
Let's break down exactly how these tools work, because there is a devastatingly simple scenario from the source material that perfectly illustrates this failure. Let's call it the cat example.
The cat example, yes. This is a classic.
Think about the last time a friend or a colleague came to you and they were clearly upset. They are offering you a calibrated, appropriate amount of vulnerability, and they say, "I'm having a really hard time today. My cat just died."
A moment of genuine, localized pain, they're handing you a small glass of water.
Now, what is the reflexive, default, ego-driven response that almost every single one of us jumps to in that exact moment?
It's so predictable.
The immediate reflex is to say, "Oh no, I totally understand how you feel. That reminds me of my cat. When my cat died 5 years ago, I was completely wrecked, and let me tell you this long, tragic story about what happened to my cat."
Which is, in the mechanics of connection, a catastrophic structural failure.
It feels like empathy. You are sitting there thinking, wow, I'm doing such a good job relating to them. I'm showing them I understand. But the reality is you are committing a subtle social crime known as hijacking the narrative.
Let's dissect the anatomy of that hijack. Because it is insidious exactly because it feels like empathy.
It really does.
When your friend shares the pain of losing their cat, the conversational spotlight is aimed directly at them. It is their moment of vulnerability. When you immediately pivot to discussing your cat, you are literally hijacking the steering wheel of the interaction and aggressively driving the car back to your own driveway.
Wow!
You are satisfying your ego's endless appetite to make every single narrative in the universe about your own existence.
The tragic irony is just staggering. In our clumsy, desperate attempt to relate to someone, to prove to them that we understand their pain by proving we have survived similar pain, we actually sever the exact connection we are trying to build.
We cut the cord.
Think about the physical geometry of this. You are trying to build a bridge to them, but instead of crossing over to their side to stand with them in their grief, you are staying safely on your side of the river, jumping up and down, pointing at your own shoes, yelling, "Look, my shoes are wet too."
You are abandoning them in their moment of need.
You leave them standing entirely alone on their side of the bridge while you talk about yourself.
It is a profound abandonment masked as solidarity. True connection requires the agonizing restraint of leaving your cat out of the conversation entirely. You have to cross the bridge and stand in their reality.
So if talking about my cat is an ego-driven hijack, what is the actual mechanical fix here? How do we actively listen in that scenario?
The contrast is stark, and it revolves around mirroring and validation. Instead of retreating to your own experiences, the active listener response was something like, "It sounds like losing your cat was a devastating blow to your daily routine."
It sounds like losing your cat was a devastating blow to your daily routine. I'll be honest, the first time you hear that, it feels almost clinical. It feels like you are reading a script from a therapy textbook.
It feels unnatural because you are actively suppressing your ego, which goes against your biological defaults.
Yeah.
But look at the sheer mechanical power of that sentence. What are you actually doing?
Right.
You are holding up a highly polished mirror to their emotional state. You are validating the severity and the reality of their experience without injecting a single drop of your own narrative into the frame.
You are locking the spotlight exactly where it belongs, on them.
Precisely. And by doing so, you are forcing that excess cognitive processing power we talked about earlier to focus entirely on them. You aren't rehearsing your story, you are analyzing their state. And to solidify that, you deploy the ultimate tool of the active listener. The follow-up question.
The receipt of attention.
Yes, a targeted follow-up question, such as, what was the specific morning routine you were going to miss the most with your cat? That is undeniable, empirical proof of your attention.
Because you couldn't ask that if you were just waiting to talk about yourself.
You cannot ask a highly specific follow-up question if you're just waiting for your turn to speak. It proves you were inside their narrative. It requires the listener to intentionally chain their own ego to the floor, swallow their own stories, and keep the heat of the spotlight shining brightly on the speaker.
It is an act of profound, exhausting generosity. You are giving them the absolute ultimate luxury, the space to exist fully, out loud, without having to compete with your ego for oxygen.
It is a gift.
But And this leads us into a really terrifying high-stakes scenario. Okay, let's say I do the work. I am practicing this. My friend tells me about their cat. I successfully chain my ego to the floor. I don't hijack the narrative. I offer a beautiful, validating statement. I ask a deep, thoughtful follow-up question. I pass the tennis ball cleanly over the net.
You do everything right.
And then, what happens when the other person doesn't immediately hit it back? What happens when you suppress your ego, you do everything perfectly right, and suddenly the other person just stops speaking, and a heavy, dead silence falls over the room?
You have stepped off the map. You have entered the void.
The void. It is arguably the most uncomfortable, sweat-inducing, agonizing space in human interaction. And this brings us to the most fascinating divergence in our deep dive today, the weight of the unsaid.
It's a massive shift in the conversation.
Because what is absolutely mind-blowing is that this void, this silence, is not a universal human experience. The way our bodies and brains process the exact same acoustic emptiness changes entirely depending on where we were raised.
The biological hardwiring of how we experience time and space in a conversation is inextricably linked to our cultural background. We are talking about the phenomenon known as the pregnant pause.
And to understand why this pause causes so much panic, we really have to look at the two massive cultural frameworks that dictate global communication: low-context cultures and high-context cultures.
Let's start with the low-context ones.
Right, the one that gives me, and probably many of you listening, the most anxiety. Low-context cultures. This includes the United States, the UK, Australia, and much of Northern Europe.
In a low-context culture, communication is strictly, rigidly explicit. The underlying philosophical assumption of the entire society is, if it isn't verbalized, if it isn't explicitly spoken aloud and spelled out in vocabulary, it effectively does not exist.
If it isn't said, it's not real.
The words themselves are required to carry 100% of the meaning.
And if we look at the evolutionary and sociological reasons why these cultures operate this way, it makes perfect sense, actually.
It really does.
Think about the history of the United States or Australia. These are highly diverse, immigrant-heavy nations. When you have dozens of different cultures, languages, and histories suddenly trying to survive and trade in the same geographic space, you don't share a historical baseline.
You don't have that shared background.
You don't share the same unspoken assumptions. So to avoid catastrophic misunderstandings, everything had to be explicitly spelled out. The culture evolved to rely purely on the spoken word because the word was the only common denominator.
That historical lack of shared context creates an environment where explicit clarity is the highest virtue. But the dark side of that evolution is how these cultures view the absence of words.
Right.
Because the words are the only vessels that carry meaning, an absence of words is interpreted as a complete system failure. In a low-context, English-speaking culture, silence isn't just quiet. It is treated like a contagion.
A contagion.
It is a social disease that must be eradicated immediately.
And the timeline for this panic is stunningly short. We mentioned this in the intro. 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. At that exact mark, the panic alarm triggers.
It sounds absurd when we analyze it objectively in a studio. 3 seconds is nothing. But consider the severe physiological reaction happening inside the body of a person from a low-context culture during that lull.
It's intense.
Their brain interprets the silence as a void of meaning, which translates to social rejection. The amygdala fires, their heart rate spikes, cortisol floods their system. Their internal monologue starts screaming, "The connection is dying. You are failing. Fix it."
And so what is the physical reaction to that cortisol spike? They babble. They are forced to nervously, frantically fill the air with noise just to soothe their own nervous system.
They'll say anything.
They will talk about the weather. They will make an inappropriate joke. They will suddenly bring up their own cat again. They will throw whatever verbal debris they can find into the void just to stop the agonizing ringing of the silence.
Because to them, noise equals safety. But now we must contrast that frantic survival mode panic with the entirely different reality of the high-context culture.
Right. When we look at high-context cultures, countries like Japan, parts of the Middle East, Mediterranean societies, and many indigenous cultures, it is like stepping onto a different communicative planet.
In a high-context culture, communication is heavily implicit. The actual spoken words might only carry 20 or 30% of the actual message.
Only 20%.
The vast majority of the meaning, the real substance of the conversation, is found in the silence itself, in the micro-expressions, in the shared thousands of years of homogeneous cultural history, and crucially, in what is intentionally left unsaid.
And to really grasp this, we have to deeply explore this incredible Japanese concept, It is called kukiwoyomu,
Kukiwayomu.
which literally translates in English to reading the air.
It is one of the most profound and sophisticated social frameworks on Earth. To read the air does not mean you have magical telepathy. It means you possess the highly refined ability to fully understand the emotional temperature, the shifting power dynamics, and the unstated agreements of a room without a single explicit word needing to be spoken.
It's incredible.
It is hyper-observance. It is reading the tension in a jawline, the exact duration of a glance, the microscopic shift in posture.
I have this visual analogy forming as we dissect this. If you think about low-context communication, it is exactly like reading a strict, ironclad legal contract.
Okay, a contract.
The only thing that matters, the only thing that holds up in court, is the black ink printed on the white paper. If it's not in the ink, it doesn't count. The white paper is just empty space.
Right.
But high-context communication is like looking at a complex classical painting. Yes, the painted figures matter. But the negative space, the empty, unpainted areas around the subjects, is what actually defines the shape, the mood, the depth, and the entire composition of the piece. The empty space is doing just as much work as the paint.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The ink versus the negative space, and it perfectly illustrates the mechanics of the void.
Yeah.
To an American reading a contract, a 3-second silence is a terrifying blank page. It is an emergency. But to a Japanese person practicing kukiwoyomu, that exact same 3-second silence is the negative space of the painting. It is dense with shape and meaning.
It's not empty at all.
It can be a profound sign of deep respect for the gravity of what was just said. It can indicate a necessary period of deep contemplation. Or it can be a moment of shared peaceful harmony where words would simply be clumsy and unnecessary.
Which is why, when these two differing frameworks collide in the real world, it results in massive, catastrophic miscommunications. Imagine this playing out in an international business negotiation, or even just a deep conversation between two friends from different backgrounds.
It happens every day.
Let's play out the collision. You have a native English speaker, a classic low-context American, whose brain relies entirely on the ink. And they are having a deep conversation with someone from a high-context culture, say Japan, who reads the negative space.
The dynamic is practically a Greek tragedy. The American asks a highly thoughtful, complex question. The Japanese speaker receives the question, recognizes its depth, and out of profound respect for the American and the gravity of the topic, they fall silent to carefully contemplate their answer.
They are painting the negative space. They are showing respect by not rushing a cheap, easy answer. 1 second passes, 2 seconds pass, 3 seconds pass.
And right there, at the 3-second mark, the American's biological alarm bells go off. The cortisol hits the bloodstream. The heart rate spikes. The American completely misinterprets this respectful, deep contemplation as a terrifying void of awkwardness, rejection, or confusion.
So the American panics. And to save the interaction from this perceived failure, they jump in and start nervously babbling. They rephrase the question, they laugh awkwardly, they over-explain their premise.
And in doing so, they completely bulldoze over the high-context speaker's moment of respectful silence. They throw a bucket of cheap black ink all over the delicate negative space of the painting. They ruin the moment.
They ruin the painting.
They shatter the shared understanding entirely. The high-context speaker was sitting in a moment of profound building connection, and the low-context speaker effectively drove a dump truck full of noise right through the middle of it, purely to soothe their own internal anxiety.
It's a tragedy. They are trying to save the connection, but their cultural hardwiring physically forces them to destroy it. So, as a listener trying to navigate the modern world, it really hits me. If you are speaking to someone from a different cultural context, you aren't just dealing with different vocabularies or different slang. You are literally experiencing time and space differently.
You really are.
The exact same acoustic environment, a quiet room, produces opposite physiological realities and emotional reactions.
Which is exactly why understanding this divide isn't merely an exercise in academic global awareness. It isn't just interesting trivia to bring up at a dinner party.
Right.
Understanding the mechanics of silence presents a massive, highly strategic opportunity for you in your own daily, localized life.
And that strategic opportunity is exactly what we need to unpack to pull all of this together. Because once you understand the cultural panic of silence, you don't just have to be aware of it. You can actually utilize it as a superpower.
You can.
You can weaponize it. Or rather, you can use it to elevate every interaction you have.
Becoming comfortable with the void, learning to override your biological panic, allows you to project an immense, almost unshakable aura of confidence and control.
So let's walk through a highly specific tactical scenario to illustrate the power of this pause. Let's put you, the listener, right in the driver's seat.
Okay, let's set the scene.
You are in a high-stakes conversation. Maybe it's a tense salary negotiation, maybe it's a deep, vulnerable talk with your partner about the future, or maybe it's a crucial job interview. And you deploy the active listening tools we discussed. You ask a deep, profound, incisive question.
A question that fundamentally shifts the ground. A question that requires real, heavy internal lifting to answer.
Right. Not a simple yes or no. And the other person receives the question, and they go completely silent. They look down at the table, they furrow their brow, the air in the room gets thick.
Now, your immediate instinct, forged by decades of low-context cultural conditioning, is to rescue them. The silence feels agonizingly heavy. You assume they didn't understand the question, or that you crossed a line and offended them, or that they are embarrassed and don't know what to say.
So you panicked.
The intense, burning biological urge is to interrupt the silence. To say, oh, or we don't have to talk about that if it's too much, or what I meant to say was...
Right, you backpedal.
You desperately want to let the pressure out of the room by filling the air.
But the mandate here from the experts is strict and unequivocal. To achieve true connection, what must you do?
You must let them be silent. You must bite the inside of your cheek if you have to. Do not interrupt. Do not clarify. Do not make a sound.
It sounds so simple in theory, but sitting in that quiet room, it is excruciating in practice. Why is it so structurally critical that we do not break that silence?
Because we have to understand the invisible mechanics of internal processing. We have to respect what is happening inside the other person's brain during that void.
What's happening in there?
When someone falls silent after a deep question, their mind is not empty. They are not frozen. Their brain is working furiously, burning massive amounts of cognitive energy. They are diving deep into their own archives, searching their memory, weighing complex emotions against each other, and constructing a fragile new narrative. They are on the absolute verge of uncovering something real, something they may have never articulated before.
They're doing the heavy lifting of true communication. They are digging for the truth.
Exactly. And if you interrupt that silence, if you cave to your own low-context anxiety and babble over them, you don't just interrupt their sentence. You literally chemically interrupt their psychological breakthrough.
Oh my goodness.
You snap them out of their deep internal dive and drag them violently back to the shallow, superficial surface of the conversation, solely to make yourself feel more comfortable.
Oh, wow. Think about the selfishness of that. You are prioritizing your own physiological comfort over their profound emotional revelation.
Oh.
You are robbing them of the climax of their own thought process because you couldn't handle 3 seconds of quiet.
Precisely. Which is why we need to fundamentally redefine what silence is for anyone listening to this. It requires a complete paradigm shift. Silence is not an emptiness that must be frantically filled with nervous noise. It is not a failure of the conversation. It is not a void.
And what is it?
Silence is a dedicated, sacred, structured space for thinking. It is a tool of creation. It is not a threat.
A dedicated space for thinking. If we extrapolate on this, if we really look at what this means for our daily lives, this feels like the ultimate hallmark of social mastery. We always hear about the importance of soft skills in leadership and connection.
Right, the soft skills.
We usually think of soft skills as being polite, remembering names, or having good eye contact. But true fluency in human connection, the absolute pinnacle of soft skills, is the ability to wield silence. Not as a manipulative weapon of awkwardness to make someone sweat in a negotiation, but as a supportive embrace.
A supportive embrace. I love that.
When you hold the silence, you are creating an invisible, silent container strong enough for them to do their deepest, most vulnerable thinking without fear of interruption.
That is the absolute essence of high-level communication. You are providing the sturdy canvas, and your silence is the negative space where they are finally safe enough to paint their truth.
But I have to push back on the reality of executing this because sitting here in a soundproof studio analyzing it is one thing. Doing it in the wild, at a dinner table or a boardroom is terrifying.
Oh, it's incredibly hard.
Letting that silence stretch out to 4, 5, 6 seconds, it literally feels like walking a tightrope without a net. You ask the question, they go quiet, and you are just suspended out there in the thin air, hundreds of feet up, totally exposed, just waiting for the other person to eventually speak and catch you.
You feel very vulnerable.
You have absolutely no control over when the silence ends. So how, practically speaking, can we actually train our nervous systems to survive the physical panic of that lull? How do we not fall off the tightrope when the cortisol hits?
It requires intentional, conscious exposure therapy. You have to actively practice it in low-stakes environments to prepare for the high-stakes ones. When the 3 seconds hit and you feel that familiar spike in your heart rate, you have to engage your prefrontal cortex and internally label the feeling.
Label it, okay.
You have to literally tell yourself, there is my cultural conditioning telling me this is an emergency. My brain is releasing cortisol. But this is a biological false alarm. There is no tiger in the room. This is not an emergency.
You have to talk yourself down from the ledge.
You anchor yourself physically. You take a slow, deliberate deep breath. You focus on maintaining soft, non-threatening eye contact. You observe the other person's physical cues. Are they looking up and to the left in thought? Are they chewing their lip? Let them think.
Just let them think.
And the most powerful reframing tool is to remind yourself in that exact excruciating moment that your silence is not a failure. Your silence is a gift you are actively giving them. In a world of constant digital noise and endless interruption, you are giving them the incredibly rare, luxurious gift of uninterrupted time to process their own mind.
That reframing changes everything. It isn't a terrifying void you are falling into. It is a generous gift you are giving. It is just a marvel to sit back and look at how unimaginably complex a simple conversation really is when you peel back the layers.
It's an entire universe of unspoken rules.
We started this deep dive talking about a social minefield, and the more we uncover, the more treacherous it seems.
Right.
But it is a minefield we can actually learn to map.
Exactly.
We've pulled together these incredible invisible threads today. The absolute necessity of calibrating the dial of your vulnerability so you don't crush someone with the emotional debt of trauma dumping. The brutal, exhausting discipline of chaining your own ego to the floor so you can genuinely validate someone else's pain without making it all about your own cat.
Right. Leave the cat out of it.
And finally, the immense courage required to embrace the negative space of the pregnant pause, overriding our deeply ingrained cultural panic to let profound thoughts actually form in the quiet.
If we synthesize the overarching theme of all these complex mechanics, it points to a singular, vital truth about how we navigate the world. True fluency in life, true mastery of human connection, has almost nothing to do with having perfect grammar.
Nothing at all.
It isn't about having the largest vocabulary or being the wittiest debater or having the loudest, most entertaining voice in the room. True connection is overwhelmingly reliant on these invisible, unglamorous soft skills. It is knowing exactly when to hold back your bucket of tennis balls.
Yeah.
It is knowing how to keep the hot heat of the spotlight firmly on the speaker. And it is knowing how to comfortably, confidently, silently read the air in a room when not a single word is being spoken.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. And as always, we want to build upon the mechanics we've explored, specifically this desperate biological need we have to fill the void, with a new, final, provocative thought for you to take out into the wild this week.
Something to actively mull over the next time you find yourself sitting in the middle of a shifting conversation.
Exactly. Here's the scenario we want you to visualize and carry with you. The next time you are in a conversation, whether it's with your boss, your spouse, or a stranger, and a heavy, unexpected silence falls between you. As you feel that familiar panic start to rise in your chest before you open your mouth, before you rush to throw verbal debris into the air just to nervous chatter the quiet away, I want you to stop, take a breath, and ask yourself one brutally honest question.
This is the important part.
Is my urge to speak right now coming from a genuine desire to add value to this person's life, or am I just trying to soothe my own physiological anxiety about the quiet?
It is a deeply revealing mirror to hold up to yourself. It forces you to examine the true underlying motive behind your words.
Because if you look closely enough at that silence and you examine your desperation to break it, you might realize the most important question of all. Who are you really speaking for when you break the silence?
An excellent, challenging thought to leave on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep listening closely, keep thinking critically about the invisible mechanics operating all around you, and above all, as you navigate the conversational minefields out there, don't be afraid of the quiet moments. Embrace the negative space, because sometimes the click you hear isn't a landmine at all. Sometimes it's just the sound of a real, profound connection finally locking into place.